Good evening and welcome. This is our Friday, May 20, 2016 edition of the Government News Brief. In the news, backlog of cases in court continues to be addressed, a national plan of action for climate change to be crafted, and squatters warned of sea defense and government reserves. I am Azim Khan and this is the Government News Brief. Stay tuned. Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Basil Williams reassures that efforts continue to address the backlog in court cases. Here is that report.
Attorney General and Minister of Legal Affairs Basil Williams explains that the entire legal system needs to be coordinated to address case backlog.
Because what happens at one end affects what happens at the other end. So you can't resolve the prison issue unless you deal with the police superintendent. Because the police superintendent is the one who deploys the police prosecutors. And if they're supervised, they could be responsible for a lot of backlog. Cases, you know, the cases not with the prosecutor, all these problems you have. So you need to have a committee so that persons representing all aspects of the justice system will sit regularly and coordinate problems.
Magistrates' refusal to grant bail for bailable offences creates unnecessary overcrowding in the prisons and should be addressed, Minister Williams says. The administration has partnered with the Inter-American Development Bank to secure additional funding to address case backlog.
As Minister of Legal Affairs, appointed by the President, I have attempted to address the issue of backlogs by budgeting in my budget estimates for provision to include part-time judges, for example. Employ them for 6 months, they were to be paid, etc. And that exercise was to be funded by the IDB. And that is still in the pipeline.
Meanwhile, an allocation of $327,000 will cater for the introduction of voice recognition systems for recording evidence in the criminal sessions of the High Court and the Magistrates' Court that deal with serious offences. These systems will speed up trial times as magistrates and judges will no longer have to write evidence. Additionally, legislation was enacted giving the judiciary its independence. With this Government News Brief, I am Glendon Greenwich.
Squatters are being warned that the government will not be regularizing areas that are not conducive to the establishment of organized communities. Here is that story.
While efforts are being made to halt squatting through the transformation of squatting areas into regularized housing schemes, there is zero tolerance for squatters on road and sea defense reserves. Minister within the Ministry of Communities, Valerie Sharp-Patterson, explains.
If the area where the squatting is taking place is not conducive for our community, we can't do it. We would have to make lands available and reallocate those persons. And some people tell you things like, oh, I've been living here for 15 and 20 and 30 years and I don't want to move. I'm sorry. We cannot regularize those areas that are not conducive for proper living. We can't. And with the vision that our president has, we cannot leave people living in those areas.
The development of these areas are in contravention of President David Granger's vision for improving citizens' living standards through the development of organized communities. Meanwhile, efforts to regularize those squatting areas that are not on road and sea defense reserves are being affected by some lands that are not owned by Central Housing and Planning Authority, says Minister Sharp-Patterson.
I'm overwhelmed with the number of squatter settlements we have in Guyana that have not been regularized. CHMPA has regularized a few, but while we have some challenges with that also, because some of the lands do not belong to us. For instance, on the East Coast and other parts, Berbice and so on, some of the lands are owned by Gaisuku. We cannot go and regularize. We have to wait, go through the process of Gaisuku handing over to us.
Since assuming office, the Partnership for National Unity Alliance for Change government has allocated 252 lots to persons in squatting areas under regularization and issued 410 titles. For the Government News Brief, I'm Tiffany Rogers.
Developments and achievements in the Teachers Education Program were highlighted at CPC's Night of Reflection, Renetta LaFleur reports.
The Cyril Potter College Education, CPC, on Thursday reflected on Guyana's education sector 50 years ago. Giving a brief history of education in Guyana, Deputy Chief Education Officer Donna Chapman says that the education sector in 1966 was substandard, but still there were some positives.
The quality of education was not the quality of education that the government wanted for the new Guyana. At that time, the quality of the education was, in inverted commas, poor. But guess what? The children who went to school during that time and long before, in the colonial days, they were focused on the 3 R's. The teachers taught them, and you know what are 3 R's? Reading, writing, and arithmetic. So many of the children came out of school knowing to read well, and I'm told by the literature again that at 1966 the literacy rate was 83%.
The students shared their excitement for the cultural event.
Tonight we are celebrating Guyana's 50th independent anniversary, and we are celebrating not only culture but cultural diversity, that we are learning to accept each culture, that we are all different but unique in the same way. And that's why I'm enjoying the program.
We're here together celebrating, having a great fun, showing different talents, our skills, and we come together as one people, one nation, and one destiny.
Celebrating the culture night. So far it's been amazing. You seeing your different colleagues showcasing their different talents, whether it's dancing, singing, whatever, and I'm having a stupendous time.
Chapman explains that the then government created a plan to offer better education to children through several interventions.
They wanted better schools, better buildings, so they started to work on infrastructure. They wanted to ensure that teachers were trained, especially those who were teaching in the land, to teach English as a second language.
She urged teachers to look at the role they can play in enhancing the education sector and ways to improve literacy and numeracy. The gathering was entertained with cultural dances, songs, poems, stories, games, kwekwe dance, and dramatic pieces. Renetta LaFleur for the Government News Brief.
Hinterland areas that have never benefited from deployment of doctors are now doing so. Shivani Rampasad tells us more.
Minister within the Ministry of Public Health, Dr. Karen Cummings, told GINA that more doctors have been deployed into the hinterland healthcare system, allowing residents to benefit from efficient healthcare.
We have deployed approximately 19 doctors to those regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. Additionally, we've had doctors going to areas that there weren't any doctors before, like Isano, Mbaimedai. Those we have doctors there are waiting to go to be deployed there.
The minister expressed satisfaction with the performance of the Regional Healthcare Services Department.
Up to date, 1,729 patients being seen by our doctors, especially in regions 1, 7, 8, and 9. Those are the hinterland regions. We have seen 130 patients that would have had successful surgeries at Mabaruma, Letem, and Bartica hospitals. Surprisingly, you would have known by now there are 3 towns. We've also had in Letem 72 successful surgical interventions. That's in Letem alone.
As the second year in office for the APNU plus AFC government approaches, the public health sector is set to undergo major upgrades. For this Government News Brief, Shivani Rampasad reporting.
That concludes today's edition of the Government News Brief. The details of these and other stories can be found on GINA's website. We encourage you to subscribe to our website and YouTube channel. You can also like and follow us on Facebook so you can be updated as the news unfolds. Remember, we are 6 days away from our Independence Jubilee celebrations. Stay connected to GINA as we continue to update you on the activities for the grand celebrations. Do join us again next week for another edition of the Government News Brief. Thank you for watching.